Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Daily Racing Form YouTube. I'm Gino Buccola alongside David Aragona, and we're going to head on out to Oaklawn Park for Rebel Day. This is a card that has been moved from Saturday to Sunday, David, because of the weather out there. We're going to try a different approach with this particular video. Instead of doing 4 or 5 individual race previews, there are the late 5 races, David, combined to make a pick 5 sequence at Oaklawn Park. 4 of them are stakes races that we would have previewed already. So it seems like that's a sequence that I think a lot of the gamblers around the country will probably be diving into because we're looking at the Rebel, we're looking at the Honeybee in those stakes races. Feels like it makes sense to maybe just do overall wagering strategy on the pick 5. So that's going to be our approach today.
Yeah, and let's just say it is a fantastic card at Oaklawn Park on Sunday now for the formerly the Saturday card. Just large fields throughout the stakes action and right on through that difficult Arkansas bred maiden race to close things out. So we're going to go through this late pick 5 sequence, races 8 through 12 on Sunday. And rather than give out 1, 2, 3, 4 picks, we're going to try to talk a little bit about how we might play these races and structure a pick 5 ticket, not by using any set formula or just giving out one ticket at the end, by talking about which horses we really want to lean on, those we want to use in different capacities, and have conversations about how to structure your wager for this pick 5.
I think this is something we all do as gamblers and as handicappers in our own different ways, right? Some of us will make a value line. Some of us will make grids. Some of us will use the ticket maker. Others will do stars and lines and dashes and dots, for the sections of horses they like the most. And then the next tier and then the third tier. So for this video and for this exercise, you and I are going to be using terminology, 3 different terms for how we want to group horses, right? We're going to use key, we're going to then use, and then we're going to have defend. So that'll be sort of the way that we are going to rank horses instead of 1, 2, 3, 4 top selections. We will still go race by race, though. We'll still give you some of our handicapping analysis, some of the gambling analysis, but most importantly in this video, it'll be why are we playing these particular horses?
Yeah, and what I was trying to get at here is kind of a riff on that Steve Christ ABC methodology that you might be familiar with from DRF Ticketmaker, and just kind of break those down into terms that people might understand to guide them towards the right kind of horses to
Yep.
slot into each of those buckets. So for me, the A category would be the horses that I'm going to key on, horses that I want to actually have win 3 or 4 of the races in the sequence, if not all 5, if I'm ultimately going to hit it. The horses that we're going to put in the use bucket are horses that I like, horses that I want to definitely incorporate into my play, but they're not my key horse. They're not the horses that I think are going to offer the best value or maybe the most likely winners, but I think they are horses that I want to work into different races throughout the sequence. And then the defend horses. I know that using horses defensively can kind of be a hot button word in the ticket construction conversation, but I think you can't be too confident in your ability to think you're going to be right in every single leg because it's hard to get all 5 races right in a pick 5 sequence. So you want to have some horses on the back burner that you could slot in and maybe be right in one of those legs where you have the key horses come in and all 4 others. So we're going to slot horses into a defend bucket as well.
Yeah, a lot of this is going to be about ticket structure because we spend so much time handicapping the races. We haven't had videos that spend tons of time going through this, the gambling structure, the wagering, how you're going to put your tickets together. If you're not mapping out at least some time of the allotted time you have to do your preparation and have that be time for wagering structure, I think you're doing it a little bit wrong. Like you want to at least give yourself some time where you're mapping things out. You know what? That doesn't work for me. That's too big for my budget. I still have a little bit more. I can use an extra horse or two. I think you have to go through that, like that kind of trial and error a little bit. And sometimes it'll all come together for you. Ready to rock, David? Should we go and start with race number 8?
Yep, let's get to it.
Okay, so we'll head on out to Oaklawn Park, race number 8. This is going to be now on Sunday. Remember, they have moved the Saturday card to Sunday, just the full Saturday card intact. And race number 8 kicks off this late pick 5 sequence. It's an overnight handicap. It's the Trevista overnight handicap, David. Just kind of looking through the field. I think some of the major players in here, the 5 Peignoir, who we've discussed before in stakes previews. And then to the outside, you have Amber Cascade in Just My Heels. All of those horses in pretty good form right now. I think they're kind of in that top tier of betting contenders. Who'd you want to start with in race number 8?
Yeah, it feels like there might be a few horses in this stakes race that are going to be ducking Torpedo Anna if she shows up in the Azeri, where a few of these might
Yep.
have otherwise been considering. And I think the horse that you mentioned, the number 5 Peignard, is kind of the horse that you have to start with. She's the morning line favorite. She's got plenty of early speed, and that's a horse that is probably going to work out the right kind of trip for her, because even though it's a large field, there's not a ton of pace in this race. So as we look at the way that I'm going to break down my ticket for race 8, I'm going to use Peignard. She's a horse that I think definitely is one of the more likely winners of this race. I just think she's fairly obvious. Her form is exposed. She ran just fine last time, had a little bit of traffic in the wayward last, but that was not a race that made me really want to upgrade her. I didn't think there were too many interesting things to say about her aside from the pace situation. So there were two horses that I wanted to focus on as my key horses in this race. The one that I like the most, and the horse that maybe would be my top pick if I was making picks in this race, is the number 1 Under the Palms, who's 12-1 on the morning line. Just a horse that feels like she's really been coming forward in her last few starts for trainer Ken McPeak. She faced off against Peignard 3 back at Churchill Downs and got a tough trip that day. I think she might have won that race if she hadn't been steadied in the stretch. Ran well last time at Oaklawn, and I think she's going to work out a good trip from the rail. And the other horse is the number 11, In Just My Heels, a horse that's, again, been in great form lately, has to overcome the outside post and also prove that she can be effective without Lasix, because that hasn't been something she's done yet in her career. But I feel like she's come a long way since the last time she raced without that anti-bleeding medication, and just really like the finish that she's put in her recent races. And she's one that does have the prior ability to sit closer to the pace.
So my approach, David, with this particular sequence is going to be try to go a little short early. We're going to talk about Muhima in the next race. I'm going to try to take a shot against her, and then I'm going to be covered late if I can get through these first couple legs of the sequence. Now, I don't go into every pick 4, pick 5 sequence with a template, but I do want to have a plan once I'm done figuring it out. What's my game plan? Who is the horse that I'm going to really try to key in on? Who are the horses, like you pointed out? Do I need 1 or 2 of these horses to win, or am I taking a swing against someone? So I want to be a little short early on my ticket, and then I'm going to open things up late. You'll all see that when we look at the grid. So for me, I thought this race was one that didn't have all that much early speed. I wanted to go short, and I wanted to use a couple of horses who I think will be forwardly placed. Now, the 5 Peignard, who you just mentioned, I think is the horse to beat, hands down. The one that I think is a little bit interesting that could offer us some value in here is the number 2, Brana Bonnie, who actually chased the lone speed winner Hoosier Philly last time out. And she's been kind of an enigma as a horse, but she's certainly capable of big efforts when she gets the right kind of trip. And Hoosier Philly did in that particular race. That was the first start back in a couple months. You know, you go a little bit down the page, you actually see Bruna Bonnie defeated Amber Cascade, who I think will be one of the major players in this race. So from a class standpoint, I think this horse can step up and beat a field like this, should be able to save ground down on the inside, get a pretty nice trip. So I'm hoping they're not going all that fast early in this race, David. I'm going to use the 2 and the 5, thinking they can both sit pretty soft forward trips in here and have a little bit left when it all comes down to finish. So I'm only going to have 2 horses in my key in this particular spot. I'm not even going to have any other defends or any other uses, because those are the only 2 that were on my radar here.
Yeah, and I like what you were saying about having that plan going into the sequence, because you do want to give yourself some room to spread in other legs, and you can't do that if you're spreading in every single leg. Personally, I found this sequence really tough to formulate strong opinions. So I couldn't find that leg where I really wanted to narrow down to anybody. And you could see I was even spreading a little bit in that first leg, using some defend horses as well, because these are tough races to get through.
So, David, you ready to move on to race number 9?
Yeah, let's take a look at this grade 3 Honeybee and Gino. The big story in here is the number 1 Muhima, who is making her 3-year-old debut for the Brad Cox Barn. I did an in-depth video on this race with Ashley Mayu that you can also find when you subscribe to the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. And Gino, I mean, she is the horse to beat in this race, no doubt about it, but I think she might get tested here on a couple of fronts, because this is a very competitive field for an early Oaks prep. And also, there's a lot of speed in this race, and she's a horse that wants to be forward.
Completely agree with you. I respect her. She is the horse with the best resume. She is the deserving favorite in this field. She's probably the most likely winner of this race. All that being said, when it comes to putting together a pick 5 or any kind of a multi-race sequence, you have to kind of go in with a plan. In the 8th race, I was using Peignard, who could be one of the shorter prices. In some of the following races, I think some of the horses who might be like your A, B, C on the morning lines, I kind of like and feel like they are pretty solid there. This is the one race where I looked at and said, you know what? I'm going to take a shot against Muhima in here. And it's not because I think she's a bad horse or anything like that. It's what you were pointing out. This is just going to be a bigger field than she's faced. This is going to be a tougher field than she's faced. And this is going to be a speedier field than she's faced. And she can certainly win this race with a different trip, but she's down on the inside. I think she's either going to have to go a little faster than what she's used to clear this field, or she could get stuck behind horses, maybe shuffle a little bit and have a different trip than she's used to. So my approach in this race, David, I was going to take a swing against Muhima. And there were a couple horses that are on my radar at really big prices that I wanted to include, both the 2 and the 3, Necessity and Jenkin. Are both horses that are on my radar, David. Necessity is coming off of a nice win, and the first 3 races did show some ability and then put it all together. And then Jenkin, same sort of thing. First couple starts took a little while to get going, and then back-to-back victories. These are horses who I think could sit really nice trips in here behind the speeds, maybe get the first jump on some of the deeper closers. So we are already putting producer Lucia out of work because already in the second race, we're going out of order here. But you know how sharp Lucia is because she's paying attention. And as I'm talking, she's pulling up my grid on the bottom. So that's why she makes the big bucks, David.
Lucy is a rock star. You put the number 13 5G as your key horse. And yeah, I mean, she's a horse that I think is going to go up from that 4-1 morning line. So I'll be interested to see if she could offer some value in the sequence. I was not the biggest fan of hers. And, Gino, I don't love to do this. Key on a couple of horses when one of them is going to be a heavy favorite, but I had trouble breaking this race down into buckets when you've got a horse like Muhima that I kind of do have this strong suspicion is going to show up and run her race in here. I don't think she's going to offer any great value, but she's a horse that, given the way that I'm putting together the rest of the races in this sequence, I don't want to take a strong stand against her that I don't really believe in. So the other horse that I would want to use alongside her is the number 6, Take Charge Milady. Again, a horse that I don't think is going to offer fantastic value in this race. And personally, as competitive as this race looks, I had trouble extracting a lot of value from it. So Take Charge Milady just feels like the horse, in my opinion, that might be moving in the right direction to potentially upset that favorite. If she's got another step forward in her, I really like the way she's finished off her recent races. So for me, it's primarily keying in on those 2 horses that could be the first and second choices in here, the number 1 Muhima and the 6 Take Charge Milady.
Just to show you how challenging some of these races are. Yeah, I had the 13 as the horse who was very impressive first time dirt, along with the 2 and the 3. And David has the 1, 6, 2, and 12. So we have 7 horses and only one of the same, one crossover. So it's a very challenging sequence, but it's a sequence where if you're right, you will get rewarded. And hopefully we can, be right about maybe the 2, which would be a very nice price in this race and could maybe keep both of us moving along to the next. Speaking of which, we move along to the Razorback, David. This is going to be race number 10, mile and a 16th, a grade 3. These are older horses here. Just a couple to mention that are some of the major players. You have Banishing, who's in very nice form. He won back-to-back races with 100 plus Beyer speed figures. He earned a 100 and a 103 in his last 2. But this is a step up. He's facing tougher company here. You have First Mission, who's a multiple graded stakes winner. He has the co-top Beyer speed figure in the field. He'll be making his first start since August of last year when he was in the Whitney. Those are 2, I think, of the major players, but a lot of familiar names in here, even towards the outside. Red Route 1, who we've seen in races just like this. Skinner, who's recently changed barns and who's a late runner who can come and pick things up if they go fast enough early on. So a big field and a lot of different ways you could go in here.
Yeah, and if you take a look at the way I'm going to break down this race, I found it tough to really single in on any horse, so I'm going to use a couple in each of these buckets. And for me, that morning line favorite Banishing is like the epitome of a defend horse because, yeah, he might be overbet with Flavian Pratt aboard. I don't really like him on handicapping, but boy, am I afraid of him going out for the David Jacobson barn. Just seeing them do some things in Oaklawn this meet that maybe I didn't see in the form. So I don't want to just get screwed over by this horse if I'm right in every other leg. So for me, he's going to be a defend horse. I would also
let me mention while you're talking about that, because I did the same exact thing with him as a defend. And for me, I just wanted to explain, I don't think he's going to be that short of a pricing here. I think he will get bet, but I don't think he's going to be a price like Muhima was in the previous race. That's why I didn't use Muhima as a defend there, because like you're saying, I don't like to defensively use a shorter price favorite that I'm not really into that much in that particular spot. If you don't like a horse like that, that's the one that you try to take a shot against. If you're like how David and I are in this race with Banishing, where you're like, yeah, I like others more, but I know this horse could still win. He's not going to be 6 to 5. then I'm okay being more defensive with the horse like that. I just wanted to explain that overall. If somebody was looking and going, why would you be defensive with Banishing and not with Muhima? To me, it all comes down to price. And I think Banishing might still be like, you know, 3-1 ish, 5-2 ish in that range with a few others, whereas Muhima could be really, really short there.
Yeah, it's kind of saying to yourself, what am I comfortable with when
Yep.
all the racing is done at Oaklawn Park on Saturday? And you're saying going in, if Mahima wins, I'm going to be comfortable losing. I don't have a strong opinion in this race, so let's just cover our bases with Banishing because it's a little tougher to just to separate these horses in the Razorback. Yeah, I'm also going to use a long shot as a defend that can pop up with a good race sometimes at the 14 sees the night. But the two horses that I wanted to key in on as my A horses in this race were the number 3, First Mission, who I don't know about you, Gino. I think he might go favorite in here. I know he's the third choice on the morning line, but he feels like the horse to be coming in for Brad Cox, who has fantastic numbers coming off layoffs in dirt routes, especially in stakes races. And the pricier horse that I wanted to use as a key horse is the number 10, Cook Creek, who's got some big races in him. He's got good tactical speed from the outside, so I think he's going to get the right kind of trip for him forward and in the clear. Was not able to do that when he got shuffled back mid-race in the Louisiana last time. So he's a horse that I think could rebound in here at a price. And the other horses that I want to use are the 1, Croupy, and the 5, Skinner. Both of them are closers. They're supposed to be pace in this race. I don't love either one of them, but I understand that both of them have a certain amount of likelihood to get the job done if the pace heats up.
So, David, we could take a look at my grid now for race number 10. The 2 horses that I have as my key horses, I'm going to be using all over the place. One of them is a price horse in full screen, who is the type of horse I like to bet because it's the type of horse who isn't the most consistent, but has a really high ceiling and is capable of throwing up a race that could compete with these on the best day. Full screen earned a 99 Beyer speed figure, 2 starts back at Oaklawn, going a mile and a 16th. That exact same race right here, I think would make very competitive, probably a little bit below the top tier contenders, but put in the mix at a very fair price. The number 8 horse, Bad is Good Boy, will also be on the tickets for me all over the place. This horse was kind of playing with them last time out, stretched out from 6 to a mile and a 16th, was right on the lead on the inside, then dropped back about a length, and then came back on and opened up again, like was just green, but is still figuring things out. So 6 and 8 all over. The 3, First Mission, who you mentioned, David, I think is the horse to beat. The 4, Alexander Helios, kind of a wild card who could be forwardly placed in here. And then we'll also talk about the 10, who you were pointing out earlier on, Cook Creek. I think can sit, has a little bit of speed. This is a horse who comes off of a poor performance in the slop last time out. So I'm going to use 6, 8 in that first spot. Then my uses will be 3, 4, and 10. My defend will be the 2. The horse that I was kind of hemming and hawing with, David, I might find a way to get in somewhere, would be Skinner. That was kind of my last cutoff, just because there is a version of this race where I could see him passing some horses late, and a lot of these horses could line up, but a lot of them are kind of tactical. They could show speed. They could sit off a little bit. So that would be the one that I kind of left off, that if I have the bankroll, I might be able to include.
Yeah, and I couldn't quite get to your horses that you're keying on in my own handicapping. What I will say about what you're doing here, Gino, is you got a couple horses that you're keying on that I think are actually going to go up from their morning lines, especially the number 8, That is Good Boy, who I think is the second choice at 9-2 on the line. I think he's going to be at least twice that price.
Yeah. So for me, it's coming down to strategy here. If I can get through those first 2 races and hopefully beat Muhima, should have a decent amount of coverage here, using probably 5 or 6 horses in this race. And then as we turn to the Rebel, David, which is race number 11, mile and a 16th. I mean, just from looking at this field, one of the more challenging prep races we've seen so far. Big field, a lot of directions to go. I mean, you can start, I guess, with Sandman, who's like the lukewarm, 4-1 morning line favorite in here, coming off of a trouble trip last time out in the Southwest.
Yeah, Sandman, I guess, is the starting point in this race because he generated so much conversation coming out of the Southwest where he blew the start and then had to make that big move around the far turn to get into contention. So I think he's the horse to beat. Probably he's the one on the morning line that I would anticipate going lower than 4-1 of those single digits because I just think there's a certain amount of trust in him, the way that he's been coming along. But there's plenty of speed in this race, so he might get the right kind of trip once again. And as we look at my grid for this race, I think Sandman is the one horse that we kind of agree on here, Gino, that he is likely to show up, going to run his race. I've got him as one of my key horses. Don't know if there's going to be stellar value there, but I do believe he's going to give a good account of himself. The other horse that I think is going to go up in price from his morning line that I would probably make my top pick in this Rebel is the number 13, Tistastic, a horse that I thought got a strange trip in the Southwest, a trip that I think a lot of people weren't talking about coming out of that race, where he was forward, actually vying for the front end early, and then just kind of lost position down the backstretch, was seemingly sulking around the far turn, lost position between horses under Keith Asmussen. He's getting a big rider upgrade in this race to Jose Ortiz, and I liked the way he was finishing at the end of the Southwest, actually kind of galloping a little more strongly than Sandman through the wire that day. And I think he's going to get the distance if pace develops like we expected to. The two other horses that I want to highlight are the ones that I've got in the use bucket. Both of them are speed horses. Speed King, I thought, ran pretty well in the Southwest. That was a fast pace, so I want to give him credit for holding on. And a horse that could really slip through the cracks here is the number 8 Innovator, who's going to be a big price for D. Wayne Lucas. I thought he ran really well in the comp last time. That was a fast pace, and I think we saw in the Risen Star last week, that might have been a stronger prep for the Risen Star than we gave it credit for at the time. So we'll see if these two speeds knock each other out, but I think they're both going to be decent prices.
Yeah, that was the last one for me too, Innovator. So he's one that is kind of off my radar, but I might kind of warm back up to a little bit, especially the way that I'm approaching this, where I'm looking for prices in these races and I'm going to be spreading out a little bit. But for me, the one horse who I think might be forgotten about a little bit in this race, David, is the 1, Cole Battle. I could see him kind of floating up a little bit because I think Sandman's going to get some money. The Baffert Matticat Road's going to get some money. I think, Hypnus will probably take a little money too. I could see the 1 being even like 12, 15 to 1. And a horse who doesn't have monster speed figures, but is really versatile, has shown us like different dimensions. I'm not sure if he's a Kentucky Derby winner, but I like him in spots like this where he can outrun his odds and he can punch up a little bit because of that versatility. So Cole Battle is going to be in the mix all over for me. I think Sandman's the horse to beat, no doubt about it, and the one they'll all have to hold off. Then in the use spot, I'm going to put a wild card, Hypnus, because this is a really impressive debut winner, but it was on the slump. So I'm kind of hemming and hawing. Was it something that like the sloppy track aided and a lot of the other horses in that race didn't take to? Is this a horse who could be maybe even better on a fast dirt track? The Dam was a grade 1 winner, won her first 5 starts. She actually beat Midnight Bisou in her first couple races there. So I will use the 4, Hypnus, as a use. And then my defends in here, the 2, Admiral Dennis, who I think could be a decent closer if they could like track back, if they go quick early on in here. Just reading into some of Brad Cox's comments about this runner, I think he's kind of high on Admiral Dennis and his chances if he gets a trip and some pace to run at. The 5, Matticat Road will be in the mix for me. That's the Baffert runner who's coming over. Doesn't look like the normal Baffert horse that they send here that's like head and shoulders above, but a horse who's moving in the right direction, who's improving, and who has the ability to sit off and pass horses, which could be key in here. And then for me, the other one would be Speed King, who was just really impressive in the Southwest from way out there. Are there versions of this race where this horse is aggressively handled out there and could clear the field? Those will be the defends for me in a race where, I like the 1 and 3 a little bit as the horses to beat, but if it's not them, I mean, honestly, I could see a lot of different things happening in a really challenging race. So keys, use, and defends for me in race number 11. Let's turn the page, David. Hopefully one of us is alive going into race number 12, trying to close this thing out. How do you see this Arkansas bred maiden special weight race, 6 furlongs, sprint distance here?
Yeah, not very nice of the Oaklawn Park Racing Office to tack this race on to the end of the pick 5 sequence when you've got full fields and stakes races leading up to this. But this is what we're left with. And Gino, given the fact that I've kind of used multiple horses in the key slot for most of the prior races that I kind of had trouble developing strong opinions, I'm going to just narrow it down to one key horse here that I'm going to hope to get alive to in this last leg. And that is the number 11 Touchdown Arkansas, who's 10 to 1 on the morning line. A horse that debuted in an Arkansas bred stakes race going all the way back to last April and has been off since then for trainer Thomas Van Berg, but he's coming back in this maiden race and he's getting Lasix for the first time, showed speed on debut, and he's got a fast workout showing a couple weeks ago. And I pulled up a video of that workout when I was handicapping this race. He was clearly best in company with a 4-time winner who's run buyers up to 80. So that says to me that it's pretty good sign this horse is doing well for his return to the races. And in such a muddled, competitive field, I just wanted to find somebody that I could have a strong opinion about. And for me, that was the 11 Touchdown Arkansas. I think the 7, 8, and 9 are all logicals. Probably the biggest reach among those is the first-time starter, the 7, Dawson James. Also saw saw a workout for him where he was best in company with
Yeah.
a trio of horses. So looks like one that might be ready to fire on debut, even though he's going out for a trainer that doesn't have a lot of success with that move. But let's say that I got all my key horses home in the first 4 legs. I do want to have some coverage with my use and defend horses because this is a pretty chaotic way to end the sequence.
Yeah, not an easy way to end either. And I noticed the same things that you did about the 2 horses you mentioned on the workouts, because I have them as my defense, both the 7
Mhm.
and the 11. The 11 had a real no chance trip in that debut too. They were lined up across the track. This horse was parked out wide, was trying to be part of the early pace. Both the 11 touchdown Arkansas and the 7 Dawson James had shown some ability in the mornings, and I think are coming into this race solid. Like the 7 Dawson James, damn, won the debut. Those are horses that are in my defend for the keys. I'll start with the first time starter, the 2 mare. Dam won the debut, was a stakes winner, won 3 of the first 4 starts. So there's a precocity there. Flavian Pratt jumps aboard. Very capable barn with first-time starters. I think Moquette's been like 10% over the last 5 years, so they could pop with the right type of horse. And a half-sibling to a horse named Landlord, who won the debut. So you see a lot of precocity there with this first-time starter, the ability to win, and then you lure the services of Flavian Pratt. I also thought the 9 Tiz Marcus, maybe the horse to beat as far as what we've seen out there on the track. I thought that debut effort was very good, was just behind $2 Eddie, but Tiz Marcus I thought ran better than $2 Eddie in that race, was 3 wide battling for the lead, got separated back to third a little bit, a couple lengths off, and then kept grinding into a photo just behind $2 Eddie. And then the other one I wanted to mention was the 5 Cowboy Sense. That was the debut on a muddy track with legitimate trouble that day. I think you could probably just put a line right through it and give that horse another chance back. So my keys, 2-9, the use Cowboy Sense, and then I will also defend with a couple that I think will be big prices in the 7 and the 11. So there is the overall grid. David, you want to do a little recap of your grid and maybe some of the key horses that you like the most throughout the sequence?
Yeah, so obviously, given how large these fields are throughout this Pick 5 sequence, the ticket that I'm going to put up, or at least the way I'm going to put these horses into categories in each race, it's a little more bloated than I would like, but I've got to just, display what my opinions are. And
Absolutely.
in the first leg, I'm going to try to at least get home with one of my key horses under the palms or the 11 in just my heels. And hopefully that's going to set me up to have success in the rest of the way, because I do feel pretty good about getting through the Honeybee with my 2 key horses. And then the 2 horses that I keyed in the Rebel, again, I think that they're both going to run well if the pace develops as expected. The Razorback, a little nervous about that one because I didn't have the strongest opinion, and I'm going to stick with that 11 horse in the final leg and hope that I can at least get alive to him, because that is a competitive way to end the sequence.
Yeah, so for me, I talked about it a few times. I have an approach here. Is this the most likely winning pick 5 ticket trying to beat Muhima? No, not really, but you have to take a stand sometimes. And I'm not someone who likes to go A. I'm not really ever going to play a pick 5 ticket where you have all the morning line favorites in there, or, all of the top betting choices. I'm always going to have 1 or 2 legs where I try to take a stand in there. So that's what I did in race number 9, where we'll try to go against Muhima there. So short early in races 8 and 9, if we can get through there, I'll just try to have as much coverage as I can, David, because if I can get through that 9th race and beat Muhima and I'm alive, I want to have a lot of horses left in the next few races to try to close it out, because I'll be sitting on something that could be paying very, very well. As we pointed out, challenging 12th race to close this thing out. So however you are playing, we wish you the best of luck. You have a look at my grid. You have a look at David's grid. Some help for you out there. And we also want to hear back from you in the comment section. Do you like this video methodology? Do you like this approach? And let us know some of the keys that you have throughout the sequence, some of your horses to use, some of your horses to defend. You want to make your own little grid. We'd love to see it as well. And yeah, we're just trying different things here because we've had the format with the race previews and the horse by horse previews, and that'll work. I think for the race of the day stuff, that works really well. But on big weekends like this, I mean, next weekend we're gonna have 3 different tracks, David, that have huge stakes races and stakes undercards. So sometimes it's a little much to have 15 or 20 different stakes previews. We could maybe preview 4 or 5 in one video just like this. How'd you think this went for our maiden voyage on one of these, David?
Pretty well, and I hope the viewers liked it. At the end of the day, we're playing the races. We know that the listeners and viewers are playing the races, so we just want to give you a sense of the kinds of strategies that we use and how we're thinking about value in terms of tackling these races at Oaklawn Park, or wherever we're going to handicap in one of these sequences for the weekend.
Yeah, I think when I was working on TVG years ago, we used to call it Inside the Mind of a Horse Player. And that's kind of what we got for you right here. How David's going to approach the Pick 5 on Sunday on Rebel Day. How I'm going to approach the Pick 5 Sunday on Rebel Day. Big thanks to our producers, Lucia and Bobby, for helping us out with all the graphics. And we wish you the best of luck on Rebel Day at Oaklawn.